Hello, this is Kathy Winker with the MLT program at the Monroe campus. Wanted to provide you with an update on how we have used iPads in our MLT or Medical Lab Tech curriculum. I'm going to apologize that I'm going to be a little bit unsteady. I am taping this on an iPad. I thought it would be appropriate to show you kind of how we've used the video function also. So I'll go through that a little bit as we go through our project here. The initiative, our advisory committee members requested greater exposure to computerization, and I'll tell you a little bit about what specifics that pertain to in just a couple minutes. But they also wanted us to always stay mindful, and as we discuss at our in-services and with other folks in the teaching process, we always want to be mindful of increasing projects that require critical thinking skills. So those were the two requests that came to us that made us look at the possibility of incorporating iPads into that initiative. So specifically with computerization, clinical sites want an increased exposure to touch screens. Touch screens are used extensively in medical laboratories. They also wanted students to have an increased comfort level with search functions. We want to emphasize to students that you're not just generating a bunch of numbers in the laboratory. You need to be able to assess those numbers for normal, critical values, and you need to be able to go into the system and search for next steps that need to be taken when you see a potentially critical result. We also wanted to use this as an opportunity to evaluate the laboratory environment for accessibility and flexibility to computerization, looking specifically at where laboratories should have computers, how we should look at the biohazard concerns, and how we should address those things. So that was a goal that we put in place for this initial project. And this was really the initial phase of us looking at virtual laboratory experiences so that we could search out some apps that were going to help us really expose the students to the laboratory environment. So as we started out our iPad project, we really had exposure to a variety of free iPad apps. We started very early in the process, so we had iPads in place really before we were set up to purchase apps. So some of the free apps that we have used in the MLT program, and again, these are going to be pretty specific to laboratory use, but the content I think you're going to find very similar in apps that pertain to other programs. Cell Atlas was the very first app that we used, and that exposes students to cellular morphology as they learn. The app has interactive games, and the great thing that is kind of a common thread through these apps is that you're able to assess through some fun ways things that we weren't able to do previously. In addition, Cell Atlas is actually an app that was developed by a manufacturer of a hematology analyzer, so the visuals that the students are seeing in the app are what you're going to see on actual lab equipment. Blood Banker was the second, probably most popular app that we used. This is in our transfusion medicine laboratory. This is a virtual exposure to blood bank processes and techniques. Again, there's a great assessment feature, and at the end the student actually sees a cross-matched unit of blood that has issues, and they see transcription problems and what that causes the patient to go through. So this was a really neat experience for them to kind of get a feel and to remind them of the patient at the other end of the lab tests that we do. For blood bank, it's really important to continue to emphasize the patient on the other end. It's the one laboratory department that we actually produce a product for the patient. So this app really was great at helping us emphasize the need for prevention of transcription errors. Other apps that we used, HemoBio, it was a resource for identifying cells, another one. And this went to an additional level where they applied disease conditions to specific abnormal cells. So this was like the next level of thinking for the students in the hematology or the cell identification laboratory. And that got us to thinking about what we could do to provide additional information on exposure to actual lab results and interpretation of those results. I found Lab Values Plus actually on my iPhone, and it was free. Unfortunately, it was not free when I went into the iPad. But this particular app I do point out to students because physicians use this as they try to remember themselves some of the specific normal and critical ranges and some how those pertain to some disease diagnoses. So for us, it really became an interactive part of our classroom discussions. Even though we didn't use it on the iPad, we actually ended up with enough students that had smartphones that they pretty much allowed us to use those in class, and we really started to develop some classrooms that were quite flexible and had the cell phones or the iPads as a real integral part of our discussions. So that one became kind of an interesting use. Merck Manual, this is an app that I will probably use for a couple different reasons. There are case studies that really are provided for medical personnel, and there are just a huge amount of links that are provided which add insights to the testing and disease progression that we study in laboratory medicines. So they actually have the potential to interact with students from other colleges as they determine what disease process is being explained. We've just touched upon this one thus far, but I know that I'll continue to expand upon what we use with Merck Manual. It does provide some great critical thinking exercises. iTunes U is another site that I see in the future will provide us with some really neat interactive potential with other students, and it gives us some resources that we typically have used in the past in paper development or really in investigation. It opens up some of these resources during our classroom discussions, as I said previously. So we have really looked at changing how lectures are given in some of these classes where these apps provide just some investigative use, which really keeps the students engaged during that so-called lecture portion. So in conclusion, Betsy asked, did you achieve your original goals? So I would have to say that students did become more proficient with the touchscreen feature of iPads. Several students ended up purchasing their own iPads or other tablet-type pieces of equipment, and we did allow those to be used in class. As MLT students progress through the course, they investigate topics on iPads during the class discussions. So that would definitely be a goal where they have gotten more comfortable to search outside of their comfort zone. So that's one goal that we were able to address pretty quickly. So we're going to continue to incorporate iPads and also our computer stations as a whole in our laboratory environment and actually in our Blackboard exercises too. I am continuously building links to apps and other sites that give them opportunity to expand upon some of the basic concepts that are presented. And we will continue to research the use of iPads as virtual lab experiences. This is becoming more and more critical as we are challenged by placing students in various clinical sites for all of the departments that they need to be exposed to in their clinical. So this is a continual area that we will look at for exposure. So what did we do with the iPads? Well, because many of the apps had the assessment tools included, we did use these to perform exercises initially to develop some basic concepts and to identify and learn some specific medical terminology that's used in the laboratory. And then the students were able to use these for self-assessment and peer assessment in their accomplishments. I would have to say that's one of the greatest advantages that we found with the iPads, that self-assessment and peer assessment part. Additionally, additional observations here, we have used the video portion of the iPad. Again, used as assessment when we are performing and really finalizing the assessment on a specific technique in the laboratory. The video portion's really very easy, and if you set up a YouTube account, you can zap them to YouTube and make them available to students on YouTube or in Blackboard. So the video use has been fun, and students, even though initially their comfort level is not evident, it is something that we've developed with the students. Also, the increased interest in discussion, the investigations online. So for students to be able to research for themselves, excuse me, on a topic that we introduce in lecture, it really keeps them engaged, and they develop their own path for what they're going to learn about that particular topic, which can be very exciting for them and can actually very much individualize what each student is doing in class. So I think that's all I have. Let me check here real quick. I apologize that I can't answer any questions, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me at kwinker@blackhawk.edu. Thanks.